recorded. So in a moment, you'll see a little message on the screen that just also says that we are recording today. And at this time, I'd like to share a presentation. So I'm going to tell you just a little bit more about Braille Institute. I know many of you already know us and are familiar with our program, but for those who don't, here you go. I hope you can hear this. If you can't, will someone please let me know?
Welcome. Thank you for joining us for this free workshop.
Yes.
Braille Institute believes there are no boundaries in sight. Don't give up on the things you enjoy. Just learn a new way of doing them. We offer classes in technology, cooking, art, music, exercise, daily living skills, and more for anyone who is visually impaired. Did you know over 1,900 ophthalmologists and optometrists referred their patients to us for help with their low vision? Receive a one-on-one remote consultation with a low vision specialist to help maximize your remaining vision. Call 1-800-BRAILLE 272-4553 to make a free appointment. Join us for any of our workshops. We currently have over 50 free workshops listed on our website that are open to the public. Register at brailleinstitute.org/classes-events. Thank you again for joining us, and your workshop will begin shortly.
Okay, I'll stop sharing now and I'll go ahead. Looks like we have a couple of other people that are joining us, so I will get them in. Okay, at this time, it's my pleasure to get started by introducing our regional director. Jay Hatfield is here, and he'll introduce our guest. Hi, Jay.
Hi, good morning, everyone. We are so pleased and thrilled to have Susan Meissner here for our special presentation as part of Library Week, National Library Week. I'm going to give you a little introduction about Susan. So Susan is a USA Today best-selling author of historical fiction with more than 750,000 books in print in 18 languages. She is an author, speaker, and writing workshop leader with a background in community journalism. Her novels include The Nature of Fragile Things, which earned a starred review in Publishers Weekly, The Last Year of the War, named to Real Simple Magazine's list of best books for 2019, As Bright as Heaven, which earned a starred review in Library Journal, and Secrets of a Charmed Life, a Goodreads finalist for Best Historical Fiction in 2015, and A Fall of Marigolds, named to Booklist Top 10 Women's Fiction Titles for 2014. She has 8 books available for BARD users and NLS library patrons. Susan was born and raised in San Diego, where she attended Point Loma Nazarene University. She will talk to us today about how she became a writer, how to create a story, and how to get published yourself. And now, here's Susan.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me into your workshop today. It's my pleasure to be with you. I love talking to people about writing, especially if writing is something that they're interested in too. So what I'm going to do is share those 3 things with you: how I became a writer, and how do writers come up with creating a great story. And I think the last one is how to get published, and if that's of interest to you. And I think what we'll do is I'll stop in between all 3 of those topics so that we can have questions from you. If you've got any questions about that particular thing, we can stop for a few minutes and address those questions. And so I actually, when people ask me, when did you become a writer? I usually tell them that what happened is I realized I already was one. I think for me, the writing gene, it came to me from my family. My dad was a technical writer during his writing years. He majored in English. He thought maybe someday he would write the great American novel. He never really actually did it, but it was something he thought of doing. My daughter is a great writer, and I've got a son who's a great writer. I think it runs in the family. And so for me, it was just realizing that I kind of had that itch too. I itched to write things down. If I was experiencing something as a child, I'd want to write about it. And I had a teacher, I think it was in 2nd grade, who sent me home with a little red journal one day. And it didn't occur to me till much later in my life that I was the only person she gave a little red journal to that day. I think she probably had me stay after class for just a few minutes. And she gave it to me because she said, you need to write your stories and poems down in something. And she saw something in me too, that I was a writer at heart. And the same thing happened in my freshman year of high school. I took a composition class with a particular teacher who's become a very good friend. And he read one of my pieces aloud to the class. That's how much he liked it. And to me, it was just an ordinary assignment, but he recognized something that I didn't quite appreciate. And that was I had the raw talent to be a writer. The thing is, even though I had these teachers in my life who were encouraging me from a very young age to exercise my gift, get better at it, I did not major in writing in college. I didn't even think about becoming a writer vocationally. And here's what I think happened to me. I realized I loved to write. I had encouragement from teachers that I was a good writer, but writing for me was a hobby. It was what I enjoyed doing at the end of the day. It was therapy. It was, what some people might do, like garden or learn to play an instrument or go on hikes. And I was afraid that if I made writing my career, I would grow to hate it because I was young and, I had just graduated from high school and I saw people coming home from the end of the work week and they're tired and they live for the weekends and they don't like Mondays. And I thought, oh my goodness, I don't want writing to become that for me. And I just kept it as a hobby. I realize now, many decades later, that you can do what you love. And yes, it can exhaust you. And yes, there's going to be maybe bad days, hard days, but you're still going to love what you're good at. And I probably could have started my writing career much earlier. I just didn't realize that you can do what you love vocationally and still love it. And in any case, I did not write in my 20s. In my 30s, we had been living overseas. My husband was in the Air Force active duty, and we had little children, and we had come back to the States, and now we were living in Minnesota, and the kids were in school, and I had some free time, and the local newspaper needed a part-time reporter. I did not have a journalism degree. I didn't have a writing degree at all, but I thought, well, the kids are in school. I like to write. I might actually like writing for a living, and it's only part-time. And so I got the interview, which surprised me because I don't have the degree in journalism. And I didn't have any writing clips to show the publisher because I wasn't a published writer. All I had were letters home that I had written to my mother when we were stationed overseas in Europe. She loved my letters and she said they were so wonderful to read. She'd copy them off and send them to all the family members. So I had those and I said, I can't prove to you I'm a great writer or that I can learn to be a newspaper writer. All I can do is show you these letters home. And I got the job. And that's when I realized I was finally in my lane. I probably could have been writing much, much earlier, but it just took me a while to figure it out. And I think that's okay. I don't know how many of you are still wondering what you'd like to do with your life, or maybe you're coming on the twilight years of your life, but it's never too late to start a new skill or to develop a new skill or to consider giving a new skill a try. It's always a good time to start something new, especially if it's going to enrich your life and the lives of others. I did newspaper writing for 10 years. And at the back of my mind, though, there was always this gnawing desire to write a novel. I didn't know if I could do it. I had never attempted it before. Life was very busy. The job that I got as a part-time reporter, because I was finally doing what I was gifted to do, I learned really fast, and they kept giving me more and more responsibility. So by the time 10 years had gone by, I was now managing editor of a sister newspaper owned by the same publisher in a smaller city. So the days are busy. I didn't have time, I thought, to try writing a novel. But what happened was when I was 42, my grandfather died, and he was every kid's dream of a grandfather. And I was at his funeral. It was one of the saddest moments of my life, losing him. And I realized that he was 84 years old. I was 42. I did the quick math. I knew that my life, if I lived to be as old as my papa, was half over. And I hadn't even tried to write a novel. And my grandpa had a kind of a cool legacy. He had created this beautiful landscaping in his backyard. It was terraced, and every layer of the backyard he had spent 4 decades making beautiful. It's quite lovely, and not very many people get to see it, but I did, and he left his mark. I think the stone walls that he made, they're always going to be there. They're not going to burn down. No one's going to uproot them. They're always going to be there. And I realized if I don't try to write the novel, I'll probably get to the end of my life and regret not having tried. So even though I didn't know what I was doing and I was a little bit afraid, I came home from his funeral and I quit my job at the newspaper, which was kind of that was a step of faith. I didn't know if I could actually make it in this gig, but I knew I had to give it a shot. And I'm really glad I did, because I wrote the book, my first one's Why the Sky is Blue. It's not even in print anymore, but it was my entree into this world. And I wasn't sure if it was going to get published. It did, by a small publishing house. It wasn't a big splash, but it was a great way for me to get my feet wet in the writing industry. And once I wrote that first book, I thought this is probably what I should have been doing all along. I was just on the slow boat to getting there. And so I've been writing books ever since. I think I'm on number 22 now. And I've almost been writing for 20 years. There were a couple of years when I was writing 2 a year. I don't do that anymore. So I think I'm on 22 books now. And I feel really fortunate that I had all that early affirmation when I was in school. If you're a former school teacher, I salute you. Teachers made a huge difference in my life. And that I was given a chance to try something that I thought maybe I should try before I came to the end of my life. So I don't know if any of you have questions about what I've just shared with you about how I became a writer, but we can stop for a few minutes and see if you have any questions. And if you don't, that's fine. We can just move on to the next topic. But does anybody have a question about how I became a writer?
Susan, my name is Fabian Castillo. I'm so blessed. I do admire you. I give you all my support. I did read one of your books. It's a great read. I read the first book called Girl in the Grass.
Mm-hmm.
It was amazing that you wrote that book. I know you're from San Diego. You mentioned La Jolla Village Drive.
Yeah.
I said to myself, wait a minute. You mentioned La Jolla.
Yes.
That's great. That's a great book that you wrote, Girl in the Grass. Yes, that's the first book I read. And I read another book called Bridge Across the Ocean.
Mm-hmm.
When I read that, and I know you mentioned the Queen Mary from Long Beach, and then you mentioned Sonoma Beach right here, towards Carlsbad.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. I'm reading the very last book called Be All the Places.
Oh, right.
And the particular that book, it did mention your name and the website, and you mentioned you're a journalist, you're a great writer, and you mentioned what's your name of your husband?
Bob. His name is Bob. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, his name is Bob, and you mentioned you have 4 children.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, it's amazing.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned
Thanks.
you did a newsletter or something?
Yes, I did. I was a newspaper reporter for 10 years. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what I mentioned. I said, wait a minute. I'm so blessed. I give you all my support if you do all these books.
Thank you. I'm glad you had a chance to read those books. I don't set all of my books in the San Diego area, but those 2 books that you read, one of them, The Girl in the Glass, it's about a woman who she starts out in La Jolla, but she ends up taking a trip to Florence, Italy. And I did that because I had the chance to visit Florence, Italy once, and I kind of fell in love with the place. And I knew that, oh, someday I'm going to set a story in Florence, Italy. So that's Girl in the Glass. And then the other one that you mentioned, A Bridge Across the Ocean. It starts out in San Diego too, with another character, somebody different this time.
Yeah.
And she ends up taking a trip up to Long Beach to the Queen Mary, which I don't know if any of you have been to the Queen Mary in Long Beach, California, but it's one of the last ocean liners of that era. It was built in the 1930s. It's the only one left, and it's a float hotel right now, and a beautiful location to set a story. It's like walking into a time machine when you step aboard. So,
thank you, Fabian. We have another hand raised. I'd like to go to Rebecca. If you open your mic, there you go.
Hi.
Hi,
Thank you so much for being here. Hi, everybody. Hey, my question is, what gets you going when you have setbacks?
Yeah, setbacks are a part of life, aren't they? No matter what we pursue, there are going to be hurdles that we come up against. And I think I have found in my writing life, as well as just my normal day-to-day life, that when I come up against a setback, it's time to kind of step back and kind of reevaluate what I'm doing and where I'm headed. When I'm writing, if I have a setback, like if I'm writing something and I hit a wall, usually that means I made a turn somewhere in the story that got me to this place where I don't want to be. And so I'll back up a few chapters. I'll go back to a chapter that was working, where everything was fine. If I get stuck on chapter 8, I'll back up to chapter 6, and I'll just start writing again, a different set of events or a different set of steps that'll take me hopefully to a different place. Setbacks in the career of writing, they happen a lot, just because when you're a writer, you can only control what you do, which is what you're writing. You can't control the marketplace. You can't control what people are going to buy, or the marketplace itself can be kind of crazy. The pandemic kind of threw everything kind of into a tizzy, and it was hard to figure out how to navigate all of that as a writer, other than the fact that we could still write at home if we were already doing that. But I've learned with setbacks in the career of it is to just know that I cannot control every aspect of it. Logistically, there are things that I cannot control. And so to lose my head over something that it is not in my ability to change is kind of it's not going to take me anywhere good. So it's reevaluating. Can I change what's happening? Am I able to change what is happening? And if I can, like backing up a couple chapters, I do. But if I can't change what is happening, then I try and find a new way to do what I'm doing. So if I have a setback where like a deadline gets moved or a deadline gets pushed up, is I just kind of reevaluate to see how can I now do what I do with this new framework. And it's always a good idea to get advice from other people, especially people who do what you do. So I look to colleagues too. There are a lot of other writers that I've become friends with. And, there's not a whole lot that's new under the sun with this. It's often that another writer has experienced that same setback, and I can ask that person, what did you do? And it's good to be able to look to what other people have experienced, because experience is a teacher. You can either experience it yourself and be taught, or you can witness someone else's journey and learn from that as well.
Great. Okay, looks like we have a question from Mary Ann. Mary Ann, I see your hand raised. Do you have a question or comment?
Yes. Related to, and you might be covering this in the next things that you talk about, but in your books you have, you have sort of reflections or synchronicities, like you tie in something that happened 100 years ago or 50 years ago or whatever, or people who knew each other in the past. When you're doing and I'm not interested in being a writer. I'm asking just because I'm in my twilight years and trying to reconnect with people. How do you do? What research do you do, or where do you look to try and find people from the past or similar experiences from the past?
Right. Yeah. When I do a research dive, and I do have a lot of my books, there are either two storylines going on where there's something happening in the current day and something in the past. And sometimes those two things dovetail inside the story, or sometimes those two characters never actually meet, but the life of one impacts the life of the other one. And as far as finding people that lived in the past, there are times when there is no one I can actually interview because too much time has passed. But we live in a great age. We were just talking about this before we started recording, that technology has afforded us some wonderful benefits when it's not driving us crazy and messing up our penmanship, because we were just talking about how none of us had beautiful handwriting anymore. But what is available to anyone wanting to research to find something out, it's never been a better time. To find out what happened in the past, a lot of libraries have digitized all of their newspapers. So for example, when I was writing a book about the San Francisco earthquake of 1906, there are no more living witnesses of that event. They've all passed on, but their echoes live on in the daily newspaper. And the San Francisco Library has digitized all of their daily newspapers. And all I had to do was become a patron of that library, and it allowed me access to all of those electronic files. And so I was able to kind of look into the everyday life of people living in 1906 San Francisco, because the daily newspaper is like a view into daily life. That is helpful. I also read a lot of memoir from writers who've passed on. Someone will experience an event and they'll write about it before they leave us. Memoirs are always good to write. I think most people, if you're thinking of maybe writing down your life story, no one ever regrets writing down their life story, even if it only takes 5 pages or 50 or 500. You're leaving it, behind for someone else. And there might be a writer someday looking for a memoir or something, or some sort of history of an event, and they'll come across your writing, and it'll show what it was like, to live in the day and age that we're living. So I avail myself of everything available to us via the internet. And if I can interview real life people, I do that. And then I always head to the library to find out what books have been written on the time that interests me, that I'm writing about.
Good question. Good question, Marianne.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions? Okay, so I guess we'll continue.
Okay. Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about how we create a great story, and I'll talk long about this, because if you're not a writer, I don't want it to bore you or anything, but I'll just tell you some inside secrets about how we writers create a story that hopefully keeps you interested and wanting to know what happens next. And the main thing about a novel, a story, is it boils down to really just one thing. And it doesn't matter if you're reading a 500-page novel or Green Eggs and Ham. It's always about a character who wants something, they don't have it, and they go after it in spite of obstacles. That's pretty much every story you'll ever read. Like Green Eggs and Ham, if you remember that from your childhood, or from reading it to your kids or grandkids, it's about Sam I Am wanting the big tall guy to try the plate of green eggs and ham, and he won't do it. So the whole book is about Sam I Am trying to get this guy to try the green eggs and ham. There's a lot of tension there because he wants him to try it and he just won't do it. And at the very end of the book, which is like the cliffhanger or the climax moment, the page has just, will he try it? Because all the different animals that were in the story are watching to see, is he going to try the green eggs and ham? And of course he does, and he loves it, and he'll eat them anywhere. Every story is about a character who wants something, they don't have it, and they go after it despite obstacles. So when I'm creating a story, like for example, I knew I wanted to write a story about the San Francisco earthquake of 1906, but it wasn't going to be about the earthquake. The book was going to be about a person who's living in the time of the quake, a person who experiences the quake. I had to give that person a goal, a quest. She had to want something in her life, and she doesn't have it, and she goes after it. And one of her obstacles, as you can imagine, is the 1906 quake. But she has to want something. And most characters in most stories, you'll notice this now when you start to read books after I tell you this little secret. Most characters in most stories want actually two things. One thing they come to the story with from the very get-go, from page one. And then as the story moves and something happens and now there's like a quest or a race, she wants a second thing. It's external. Everybody can see it. But she began on page one with something internal, something that maybe no one else knows about her but her. If you think of Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz, Dorothy's goal when the movie gets going is she wants to get back home to Kansas. That's what she wants. Many, many obstacles to getting back to Kansas, if you remember. Number one, she's in Oz. Number two, there's a witch after her. So she's got some obstacles to getting back to Kansas, and she doesn't know how to get there at all. But the movie begins with her wanting something else. The movie begins with her wanting a place where everything is perfect. And she sings about it. She sings Somewhere Over the Rainbow. Before the tornado ever comes, she's singing about what she wants. So she has an internal goal that we're going to see play out in the whole movie or the story, if you've read the story or listened to the story of the Wizard of Oz. So she's somebody who wants a world where everything is perfect. And then she's vaulted into Oz, and now she wants to get back to Kansas. And there's only one way to get there, and it's finding the wizard. And so she has that internal goal and the external goal, and it's all about the tension. You keep listening to a story or turning its pages because you need to know, are they going to get what they want despite all of these obstacles? And so for creating a great character with a great quest is thinking about, what do they want? What do they want out of life? Why don't they have it? Does it matter if they get it or not? It needs to matter. And what kind of obstacle am I going to throw in their way so that it'll take some pages for them to get what they want? It's the obstacles that get thrown in the character's way that keeps you turning pages or listening. And that's how you create a great story, is providing the reader or listener with a character who wants something. And it's got to be something that everybody can relate to. And the quest has to be for the duration of the book. And the reader or listener has to wonder, are they going to get what they want? And that's the secret to a great story. So for me, that's how I build a great character, is deciding from the very, very beginning, what does she want? Why does she want it? And what stands in her way? So I don't know if there's any questions about that, but I'd be happy to answer any question you might have about developing a plot or a story.
This is Patricia Shevlin, and I love all your books, even though somebody recommended about reading about one book out of your the book that The Girl from the Glass, and then I asked, yes, yeah. So anyway, in my book club, they asked us to read somebody recommended to read the Girl from the Glass. But then I read it, and I asked them, any more books that are available, and they sent me all the books that are available for the blind people. So I read all of it. Even though I read one book, I can't stop reading all of your books that are available for us. So I love it. You did a good job. Keep up the good work. So I can't wait to read more of your books. But I think that's all they have in the Blind Center that they sent me. Are 8 books that we have?
8 books in our collection.
So do you have any more book available for us? I can't wait.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how that works. We'll have to talk about that later to see how we can get more into your library. I don't know how it works, but I'll find out. Thank you for your nice words about my writing. I appreciate that a lot. I really do.
Yeah, I can't put it down. I take it with me everywhere I go. I can't stop. I even messed up my sleeping hour too. I say it's worth it.
Well, sorry about that, but you know what? I like hearing that. I do apologize for the lost sleep, but that's what we writers try to do, is to keep you hooked in to what the character is after, and to keep you guessing. And that, of course, is what keeps you from being able to go to sleep and having to know what happens next.
Thank you, Patricia. And I could, sitting here listening to you talk about writing and building characters, I could see why you're the writer that you are. You're a storyteller. And when you're just verbalizing and hearing you tell the story, they're just very authentic and sound. And I know that you write fiction. And even though, you know, fiction is not real, but a lot of the parts of it are real. So I'm wondering, how do you decide what fictions you want to include? Do you just kind of plan that out, or does it happen holistically, or how do you decide about, you know, the real and the fiction?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, because I write what is known as historical fiction. So all of my books have some sort of historical event that the story revolves around. And that event, I try to stay as accurate as I can to what really happened. I kind of feel like I owe that to my reader. If I'm going to take you back to 1906 San Francisco, I want it to be true to how it really was. And so before I write any story, before I decide on characters or start writing about the characters, because my characters are usually all fictional. They are born inside my mind. I study the real thing. So I spent like probably 4 or 5 months reading all about San Francisco at the turn of the century, about what it was like to live there, about life before the quake, life during the quake and fire, what was it like afterward. All of that I felt like I needed to know first before I invented anybody imaginary. So I create like a database in my mind of all the real logistical things about what really happened in that time and place. And then I start playing with the imaginary. So for the 1906 San Francisco book, I could have put any number of characters in there. I had to decide, who am I going to put into this very interesting setting? You know, the setting of the earthquake. Not everybody knows what it's like to live through a quake. You know, I live in California. We have earthquakes all the time. But some people live in places where they've never felt a quake, not even a little one. But everybody knows what it's like to feel like your world is falling apart. Right? I mean, life can be hard, and sometimes we go through a season in our lives where we're just grasping for a handhold because it feels like the ground beneath our feet is crumbling. And thankfully, those times usually don't last. But when you're in it, it's a tough time. Everybody understands that feeling. And I thought, well, if I can just use that metaphorically of the world feeling like it's crumbling, then I can put a character into a story where her world begins to fall apart. And so that's what I did. I created a mail order bride who marries a San Francisco widower who wants a new wife for himself and a new mother for his 5-year-old little girl. He sends her a train ticket to New York, where she's living in a terrible tenement in Lower Manhattan during a really rough time to be a new immigrant. And she comes out to San Francisco and marries this man she's never met. The mail order bride thing was kind of a thing at the turn of the century. A great many Eastern women from the East Coast came out west to marry people as mail order brides. And she's trying to create a sense of happiness for herself. And she's taking a lot of risks to do that, but she does it. So she's cobbled together this happiness as best she can make it. And then the world starts to fall apart. And so that's when all the reality of what I studied came into play. So everything that I learned about San Francisco before the quake and during and after, I started putting into this life that I created out of nothing. Because I do want you to feel like if you read one of my books and I have a historical event there, that you can trust me that I'm taking you to the real thing.
Awesome. So lots and lots of research, I could just imagine. We have a couple of questions. Let's go to Mary Ann, and then we'll go to Rebecca. Go ahead, Mary Ann. You're muted.
start.
There you go. Oops, muted again. Uh-oh, she got disconnected. Let me see.
Oh.
Oh, I'll call her back. Let's go to Rebecca.
Okay, first I want to say thank you so much. A big thank you to Wanda for helping to facilitate this. Thank you. We
You're welcome.
appreciate you for doing this. And also, I'm a new writer, and I have something in common with you because I have 4 kids.
Oh.
Yeah, but I just started a blog a couple months ago, and I'm just wondering, do you know if if you can recommend any retreats or workshops for newbies like me?
Oh, yeah. Finally, I think after a long 2-year period where we weren't having writers' conferences or retreats, we're finally seeing movement again where we're having live events. And depending on where you live, there might be a writers' conference near you. I would, like in San Diego, in the past, there has been a writers' conference in La Jolla and one put on by San Diego State University. They had to not have those events the last couple of years, but I'm hoping that they'll be able to start having them again. And I would, Google your area where you live to see if there are any writers' conferences. Conferences are not exactly like a retreat. They're really more like for you to learn the ropes. And so if you're really interested in the retreat, then you'll want to look for something different. Use with your Google search is be very specific about a writer's retreat. I don't know of very many of those, but I know they have to be happening. They're probably very localized. And I would say if there's a writer's group in your community, like maybe you can find out through your library system, if there are writers groups that are already meeting. There might be like a writers guild in your area where you live. Like in San Diego, there's a thing called San Diego Writers Inc. And it's a group of writers. They probably haven't been getting together much this past couple of years, but that's the kind of environment they've created for each other, is a community of other writers. And so I would definitely check your local area to see, and maybe see if your library too knows of writers groups or writers communities in your area.
Great.
Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, looks like we have Marianne is back with us. Are you there, Marianne?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yes. Go ahead.
Okay. I also have 4 kids, and I relate to your realizing in your 40s what how to refocus yourself. I did the same thing, but not as a writer. My comment is about the characters that you create at the turn of the century, like in the early 1900s. In the ones that are in your books, my recollection of all the grandparents and everybody I knew who was born in the 1800s, they're more austere or more severe than your characters. They've been through World War I, they've been through the Depression, they've had the privations of World War II and everything. So I'm very interested when I read about your characters in the early 1900s. I think to myself, really? I wish I'd known those nice people back then.
Yeah, I think there was a different way of handling trouble, I guess you could say, in the earlier part of the early 20th century. Like, for example, I wrote a book about the 1918 pandemic, actually, called As Bright as Heaven. And it was a forgotten flu. Nobody really had heard of the Spanish flu pandemic until we had our own pandemic. And then all of a sudden, people are going, oh my goodness, there was a pandemic only 100 years ago, and it had been all but forgotten. In fact, one of the books I read for research was called The Forgotten Flu, which is really amazing because it was still worse than COVID. 50 million people died worldwide, and it had all been but forgotten. And I think it's because when that pandemic ended and World War I ended right about the same time, everybody just said, we're not talking about this. we're shutting the door on all of that. And they just moved on. And I think that was a one way of dealing with heartache and trouble back then, was we're not talking about it. And we don't do that now. We have probably too many ways of talking about how we feel. And there's something to be said by exercising some restraint. But anyway, I feel like to get into the head of somebody who lived back then is to read like letters and diaries and memoirs. And sometimes you just have to imagine what it must have been like to live back then. Because if you don't have any literary remains from people who lived it, because as you say, people kind of held back then you have to start imagining what it was like. Today's reader wants to know, what did it feel like? And so we include that in the story, because you need to connect emotionally with the characters. You need to care about them. And to do that, we need to invite you into their heart and head. And so we probably do give our characters some transparency that you didn't see back then, but it's all to be able to give you the best story we can and to invite you into the characters' thoughts and their heart. Because the story is usually, it's a better experience for the reader if you feel like you're inside the character's heart and head. And so yeah, as far as how to tap into the personalities of the people in the past when they're so reticent or closed off, is to hopefully get into letters and diaries where they were more authentic. And then just to imagine, just imagine if that was me back then, how would I have felt?
Great. Awesome. Any other questions from anyone? Anyone have anything else? If not, I do have another one. And we have several book clubs at our location in San Diego for this. So we love books, and we have a class called I Love to Read. So, and we're always reading, and even just listening to you talk about how you do your work and some of the topics are things that we've read about, like the Spanish flu and things like that. But I'm wondering, where do you get your ideas for your writings? What stimulates you to write about a certain topic, whether it was a girl in the glass or the bridge over the ocean or whatever was that particular story? I'm just curious how you do that.
That's a good question too. There really is no rhyme or reason to it. The ideas, it's almost like I can't go looking for it. Almost all of the ideas I've had for stories have kind of come at me from around the corner. There have been some, like I wrote a book called Secrets of a Charmed Life about two sisters, young sisters, who are living in London right before the Blitz, and they're evacuated out of London with 500,000 other London children. And that has always interested me. How parents could put their children, little children, onto a train to evacuate them out of London and not know where they're ending up. And to get a postcard in the mail 5 days later that says your child is in Gloucestershire, and you've never even met the people that are caring for your child. That to me was like, I had to explore that because I'm a mother. That was one book where I felt like I had the interest, and then I decided to write the book. But some of the other books, like A Fall of Marigolds, which is set on Ellis Island, I had never thought to myself, oh, I'd like to set a book on Ellis Island. It was just, I was in a bookstore one day, and on the sale table was an encyclopedia, a pictorial encyclopedia of Ellis Island. And I just started flipping through. It's a bunch of photographs. And I, just looking, and I saw a picture of nurses on Ellis Island. And I thought, why are there nurses on Ellis Island? I had no idea there was a hospital there. I had no idea that if you were an immigrant and you came to America and you were sick, they didn't put you on the next boat back home. They tried to make you well. So they'd send you to the hospital, which is not where you wanted to be. You wanted to go to New York and get off the boat. But if you were sick and you couldn't pass your medical inspection, you went to the hospital right on the grounds, and they tried to make you well. That's why there were all those nurses there. And I thought, I'd like to write about that, about a nurse on Ellis Island who sees people every day who have this dream of getting to America, and they're this close and they just can't quite make it. So that's where that idea came from. And, you know, sometimes I'll just see a newspaper article and I'll thought, that interests me. And I'll just clip it out and stick it in a file. But they come from all kinds of places, either something I read or just because I've just been in the right place at the right time, where something came my way and I thought to myself, there's a story there.
Yeah. And so how do you test it out to see if it really is something, you know, that'll be good for the readership and that people will connect with? I mean,
yeah, you know, it really goes back to what I said a little bit earlier about character motivation. If I find a really cool setting like Ellis Island, that hospital, turn of the century, at the height of the immigration wave, I had to find a character, and I knew I wanted one of them to be a nurse. I had to ask myself, what does she want? It's not just, that she wants to help people. It's got to be something else. It's got to be compelling, and it's got to be something where she wants something and doesn't have it. So I decided, well, what does she want? And I thought, well, if she's on Ellis Island, where everybody else just wants to get off, and she's there by choice, what led her to be there? And so I had to give her a wound. You know, I had to make her sad. I had to give her a reason not to want to go home to the mainland. She lives on Ellis Island, at a place everybody else wants to get off of. And so, you know, I had her be grieving. She's grieving a lost love. So there are other things I could have given her as a character motivation, but I know grief is a powerful one. Lost love is a powerful one. And the fear of moving on, like if you've lost somebody you've loved, to move on, to move past grief, is to feel like you're moving on from that person. It's hard. And I thought I could do that with her. And then, you know, her motivation would be, you know, how much longer can I stay stuck right here in the middle of the Hudson River, not moving on with my life? And so it was a matter of deciding what does she want? Will the reader care about it? And, you know, grief is a universal thing. We all know what it's like to lose someone. So I needed to have her want something that everybody can relate to.
Awesome. That is so great. We have a hand up from Nadia. Nadia, thank you for waiting. You have a question? Your microphone is on mute. There you go. Thank you.
So I had a question about, well, I have been trying to write a book for a while. I have plots, I have ideas, I have, you know what I mean? But I've never been good at writing descriptions. And I think it's like a blind people thing, because I don't have experience like, you know, with like nature and stuff like that. So like, I'm terrible at writing the descriptions to make you feel like you're there. I have all the dialogue, I have all like the plot, like I know where I want the story to go, but I'm terrible at description. Like that is where I get stuck. And you know, like, I mean, when I read your books, I feel like I'm there. You know what I mean?
Right.
So,
no, I hear what you're saying. Yeah, you know, to write so that your reader has a sensory experience, and you know, vision is one of them. It's also the other 4 senses too, which you're probably really good at those, and you just might
I suppose
you might need somebody else to help you tease out the visuals of it. But there's a book called Word Painting, and I cannot remember the author's name. I know she's female, but the book is called Word Painting, and it's kind of a tutorial on descriptive writing. And I remember when I read that book probably 10 years ago, it stayed with me, which is I think why I remembered the title of it. But I would see if that's available to you, to either as a audio version, or at the library there, or something like it, because there are people that just have a hard time with that anyway, and they might have perfect vision, just don't know how to quite, you know, don't know quite how to put into words what they see with their
Yeah,
eyes.
like the most I get is, oh, it's sunny outside and the birds are
Yes.
singing, and then this person said this. I'm like, okay, I'm done describing. I'm sick of trying to do
Right.
this.
And there's other ways too of like you just said, the sun was shining brightly. Well, even though that's true, and even though I can see it, and perhaps a visually impaired person can't see it like I see it, to say the sun was shining brightly does not invite your reader into a sensory experience. You're just telling them the sun was shining, and you want to show them rather than tell. So what you could say is, she stepped outside and she felt the warmth of the sun rays on her shoulders, or she stepped outside and took off her sweater or whatever, because you're relaying information that is more descriptive in nature rather than just telling the reader it was sunny outside, is to use one of the senses that you're good at to show that the sun was shining. Mm-hmm. And that takes a lot of skill. It's called, I think they call it passive writing if you use the word was. And so whenever you have, you're going to do some descriptive stuff. If you find you're using the word was, the sun was shining, that's a passive way of saying, then you can try new ways of showing the sun was shining. She stepped outside and her, had to shield her eyes, or she stepped outside and well, now I can't think of any other good ways because it's hard.
Yeah.
But that will help you too.
Susan, I was just wondering, what about collaborating? We had an author visit us on one of our book clubs about a few weeks ago, Dan Bigley. He wrote a book called Beyond the Bear, and he was sighted, but then he had an encounter in Alaska with a bear, and the bear destroyed his eyes. And so he wrote the book Beyond the Bear, and now he's visually impaired. But in his book, he collaborated. So I wonder if for some visually impaired writers, if that might not be an option to explore when you have a story to tell, to partner up with someone perhaps. And get some assistance and support that way for your, for your thoughts and what it is that you're trying to say.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
I just thought of that. But anyway, I hope that helps a little bit, Nadia. I see we have another hand raised. It's Myra. Go ahead, Myra.
Hi. Thank you so much for being here. I just want to say that you're such an inspiration to me. Just hearing your story and how you started writing, and you just made me smile. And I'm just really looking forward to reading your books. I can't wait.
Thank you. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much. It means a lot to me. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. You made my day. Seriously.
That's awesome. Well, I was just doing a time check. We're just have a few more minutes left. We have about 7 more minutes, and I do want to be respectful of your time. So back to you.
Okay.
If there's anything else that you'd like to share before
I will tell you really quickly, if you're thinking of getting published or you're wondering how does a person get published, I'll do the really, really quick version, and then we might have time for maybe one question post that. But getting published is different for every writer. So how I got published will be different and unique from how someone else gets published. But these days, if you want to be published, there's 2 ways to be published. You can have a publishing house take your work and publish it and send it out to the masses, and then you get royalties because they take all the financial risk. So they actually pay you for your work. And then when the book goes out into the public, you get royalties on that. Or you can publish yourself. There's some great ways to do that now. So if you really, really want to be published, if it really, really matters to you that you're published, you can make it happen yourself. The thing about publishing yourself is it's really, really hard then to distribute and to get traction and to get visibility in the marketplace. It's extremely difficult. So if that matters to you more than actually getting published, you'll want to just kind of wait and see if you can get published traditionally. But usually in today's market, if you've written something and you've had somebody look at it to make sure it's been proofread and it looks great, and you've had maybe some beta readers read it for you and giving you feedback and critique, and you're ready to maybe see if there's a publisher for it. If it's a book, if it's something of length, usually you get an agent first. You might get a literary agent first, who will then represent you to those publishing houses, because the big publishing houses don't usually work with writers on their own. They want an agent as a go-between. And so a good way to find an agent is to either start following them on social media to see which literary agents are the kind of people that represent the kind of work that you're writing, or to go to a writer's conference. A lot of writers' conferences will have literary agents who come to the conference looking for new writers, and they'll have what they call pitching sessions, where you sign up for 15 minutes to pitch your idea to an agent. And you don't hand it over that day, your work that you've worked so hard on. Usually what happens is you pitch it to them verbally. And if they like what you've had to say about it, they'll say, well, send it to me. And when they get back to their office, you send them an emailed version of your work, and then they'll read it and they'll see if they can represent you in the marketplace. So all of that information that I just told you is available, probably a wealth of it, in a number of different websites. And if you're kind of just dabbling in writing, there is a magazine called Writer's Digest that I have subscribed for a long, long time. That kind of tutored me on how to be a writer, because I didn't really know what I was doing. So I would say Writer's Digest is a great magazine for that. They might even have a way for you to get a hold of one that's for visually impaired. I don't know for sure, but it's a great resource.
Question. I don't know how to raise my hand here.
Go ahead, Catherine.
Thank you. Yes, what about the third way? What do you think about it, of small publishing houses, regional publishing houses, independent?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the smaller houses is a great way to start. My first publisher was a smaller house. There are some houses where you go in with the house, you kind of collaborate with them, so that you put up some capital and they put up some capital, and it's more of a partnership. That's another way. There's I think it's I'm not sure if it's She Reads Press, but that might be one of them, where both the author and the publisher work together to get the book out there into the wild. Yeah, not entirely sure. I've never gone that route, but if you are thinking like I think they're called subsidy publishers, which means you kind of subsidize the effort. They put forth some effort, and then so do you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and I apologize for not acknowledging. I wasn't sure, Catherine. I saw that. I thought the sun was in your eye. I'm so sorry to make you wait like that. Shame on me. Okay. Any other questions about getting published? Anything that you just heard? Now's your time if you have a question. Looking at our time, it is 11:58. It's been really a very good and informative session. I know I've certainly enjoyed it. I don't know about the rest of you, but I find the whole process of writing and also reading, we read quite a lot. So that was really awesome. Want to thank you so much. And I'll pass it back to Jay for the closure.
Yeah, thank you so much, Susan. We appreciate not only your presentation today, but all the books that you've written, all the ones you're still to write. So looking forward to those as well.
Thank you.
And thank you for all the participants on the session today. Just a reminder, we've got a couple more this week for our library week. Tomorrow, there's one called Connect with Your Library. It's at 10 to 11 in the morning. I'll learn about free resources for Braille Institute's library, book clubs for adults, how to access the online catalog, to find great reads, and more. And then the following day, on Friday the 8th, we have another Meet the Author, Yolanda Nava. And it says, meet an Emmy Award-winning broadcast journalist as a news reporter, anchor, talk show host, and Capitol correspondent. That is Friday from 1 to 2:30 p.m. And again, thank you to all of you. Another big thank you to Susan. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Susan. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Susan. You
Thank
did a
you.
wonderful job this
Thank you.
presentation. I did enjoy your read, your books. I give you all my support. Thank you.